Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a two-time Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year and a business author. As an author, he has authored The Power of Differentiation, The Umbrella Collection, and Umbrella Stories. His name is Barry LaBov, and here's my interview with Barry. Barry LaBov, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Well, thank you, Aaron. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Now, tell us how you went from being a rock musician to a two-time Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year.
Well, that's a crazy story, I'll have to tell you. For years as a young teenager, dreamt of writing rock and roll songs and being in bands and having a very successful career. And what happened as I went down that road is I learned a lot about creativity. I learned a lot about working with people who have a lot of talent, who are not necessarily perfect, like nobody is, but working with them, getting the best out of each individual, and then performing together. So what happened over a decade and a half was I wrote hundreds of songs. A few of them were on the Billboard charts. One or two were on rock music videos on VH1 and MTV. And one was on American Bandstand as well. And there was a level of success that I achieved with it and our band together as a team achieved. But there was a point where I said, I have sold well under 1 million copies of my music. It might be time to look at other horizons in my life that I could consider. So I looked at the world of business. And one of my clients who I was doing some music work and some audio work for approached me and said, I want you to do all of our marketing. And after about a year or two of saying no to them, I finally woke up and I said, okay, why do you want me to take on all of your marketing? And he said, because we trust you. And I have to tell you, Aaron, that really hit me. And I thought, maybe there's something there. So I then pursued it. And it began a 40-year journey that has been very, very fulfilling. As today, we now work with companies all over the world, including Harley-Davidson, Macallan Scotch, Stoli Vodka, Mercedes-Benz, and many, many other small and very large brands. And we're able to help these great companies and the people who are behind them to differentiate what they do, not only to their customers, but just as importantly, to their employees, the very people who are behind their product or service.
One of your books is called The Power of Differentiation. And without spoiling too much of The Power of Differentiation, what is that book about?
The book focuses on how important it is for small and large companies, and it could even be for personal branding as well, how important it is, how critical it is to identify the distinctiveness that you offer. Not every company or brand is going to be superior, but they each have their uniqueness, their magic. And what's so critical is to discover that magic. Forget about being on the journey to create something that's never been created before and something that perhaps you cannot deliver. Look at what you are delivering today and why it is unique, why it is something that your customers find of interest. So I wrote a book filled with fascinating stories of individuals at companies who led those teams to determine the differentiation of their brands. And then, as I mentioned earlier, celebrating it with their employees.
You're also the author of the Umbrella Collection series, which contains two books, the Umbrella Collection and Umbrella Stories. Without spoiling too much of each book in that series, what are they about?
Well, the Umbrella series is actually a collection of a dozen books, but it's in two different collections. So the Umbrella Story is all about how a business leader worked with a dealer, a small store owner, to create a relationship over the years. And it covers their challenges, it covers their travails. And it's written in a very simple fashion, unlike my book that I just talked about, which is The Power of Differentiation, which is a business book. These are written as parables, business parables. They're stories, and they have unique characters in them, and they're actually illustrated similar to what a children's book might be. So they're a very basic approach to very important business principles.
What are the easiest and most difficult parts of writing books for you?
You know, what's really rough for me in writing a book is not dealing with writer's block, because a lot of people do. I find that that's not the problem. My biggest issue with writing a book, and I've written so many of them, is organizing them so that somebody, a stranger, could read them and they go, you know what, that makes sense. That is in correct order. Because one of my challenges is I think from a very creative standpoint, and I do not necessarily think in a linear fashion. So my biggest problem is writing it, but then the editing of it is where I have to focus most of my time.
How were you able to get a book publishing deal for The Power of Differentiation that involved distribution by Simon and Schuster?
There are many companies out there that will offer assistance in writing a book, editing a book, etc. There are a few, however, that also have distribution relationships. And that's what I looked for, because one of the keys is, yes, you can sell a book on Amazon, but you want to get distribution and you want to get support from an organization that is worldwide, that can ship books, that can be able to service all worldwide. And that's what I looked for. And I was on that mission for about a year and a half until I was able to achieve that. And it was not easy.
How were the Umbrella Collection books published? Were they published and distributed the same way, or did you use a different publisher for the Umbrella Collection books than The Power of Differentiation?
The Umbrella books were self-published. We created them as a tool for my company to share information with clients. We even did something that your listeners may find of interest, and that is we enacted them. We turned them into mini plays or performances. So we put those on, we performed those throughout the United States in hundreds of different locations as we performed those books. But from the publishing standpoint, those were purely self-published.
Why is brand differentiation important in today's business world? And I'm going to go into a part of the interview where I help our listeners understand your book, The Power of Differentiation, more fully.
The reason today that differentiating your brand is more important than ever, and it truly is that if we look at how high the retention, how high the turnover is at companies and how retention is sought after by companies. Basically, what I'm saying is it's very easy for employees to walk off a job and say, you know what, I'm not doing anything that I feel is meaningful. I'm going to go somewhere else. So as we looked at differentiation as a major topic, at first, Aaron, it was primarily focused on, okay, how do you maximize your market share? How do you make sure you sell your product at a good profit? And that's important. But if we realize that during COVID, over 60% of the workforce walked off the job and quit, either to not go back to the workforce again or to take a different job, it's unbelievable how important it is to give people significance. And differentiation does that. Differentiating describing why your product or service is unique and the difference it makes in someone's life may be the only reason an employee really wants to work for a company. And it may be the only reason an employee wants to do a great job. And we have to provide that significance to them. And that's what this book is all about.
You firmly believe that leaders of a company should share and celebrate their brand differentiation with employees first before doing so with the rest of the world. Why is this?
I believe that it's a sin when a company relaunches, rebrands their products to the world and they do not discuss it, let alone celebrate it with the very people who represent it. How many times have you made a phone call to a company and say, hey, I want to talk to you about such and such? And they go, yeah, I don't know anything about it. Or you walk into a store and they go, hey, I noticed that you're doing this or that. And somebody said, well, that's what the powers that be say, but I don't really know. They don't tell me anything here. To me, that's a sin. And it's a wasted opportunity. So what we believe in, what I believe in, is not only should a leader, and this is on every leader, it's on every one of us, a leader should not only express what the company is doing, but they should bring their employees into that process. They should listen to those employees, learn from the employees, and yes, they should celebrate with the employees what this brand is about and the role that their employees play. I'll give you one example that's in the book. My company works with an ambulance manufacturer. I talked to one of the young people on the line building an ambulance, and I said, what do you do? And he said, I plug in wire harnesses, but I'm going to leave. I'm going to go down the street to work at a marshmallow factory for 25 cents an hour more. And I said, well, let's think about this. I said, that ambulance that goes down the line will have a life of about 10 years. And during those 10 years, over 100,000 people will be inside that ambulance and they will be protected, or sometimes their lives will be saved by it. Now, those people that I'm talking about could be the EMTs, could be the driver, could be the patient or the patient's family. I said, you are doing that. And he looked at me, Aaron, and he said, I never thought I was in the life-saving business. And that's what we have to realize. Perhaps that individual is not just plugging in a wire harness. Maybe he's helping to save lives. And that's what the leader's role is. We need to let them know they are saving and protecting lives.
What role does the customer experience play in a company's brand image?
That's a great question. We consumers, so let's talk about us as consumers. Let's say we're going to go buy a car. We walk into a car dealership. If that experience, the service we get is very, very poor, if we're not treated with respect, if we're not listened to, we usually will do what? We'll walk out and say, I will never buy that product ever in my life. Well, here's the problem with that. That experience, it was terrible, was being delivered in that moment by people at a dealership in a store. The company that is making that product, that car, let's say, has no idea that you were just treated poorly. Their car may be wonderful. It may be a brilliant piece of machinery, yet you, the consumer, will never go back to buy that car again because, and this answers your question, the consumer does not distinguish between the experience they receive and the brand. It's all the same thing. A lousy brand experience means I think the brand's terrible. A great brand experience means I think the brand is great. That's the power of a brand experience.
You have worked with some of the world's most famous companies and brands, and why did they choose you to serve them?
I've sometimes wondered why a company out of Scotland, like the Macallan Scotch brand, chose us. We're out of Indiana, or why Mercedes-Benz did, or Kia, or other wonderful brands. I believe the reason is, and they've told me this, is that we understand business, number one, and we make it very personal because business can be very cold and calculating. We look at business from a personal standpoint, the human aspect. And these great brands have tens of thousands of people behind them. They need people like my company that show humanity and show that we care personally about their performance. The way my company looks at it is this: my company is not the hero. I am not a hero at all. We are the people behind the great people, or the people behind the heroes and the hero brands. That's our role. We support the great brands and we do it with humanity.
If you have a defined personal brand of your own, what differentiates your personal brand?
My personal brand is all built on integrity and taking care of individuals so that they are performing at their best. So what I do is I see the magic in people, which is what I do with brands. So my personal brand is I can see the potential and magic in somebody. I can express it and give them an opportunity, hopefully, to achieve it. Now, they may not want to do that, or they may say, yeah, I guess I could do that, Barry, but yeah, I don't know if I want to. But I see the magic in people and brands.
Barry, you were an amazing guest. As the son of a Hoosier, my mom grew up on a farm in northern Vermilion County, Indiana. Although I live in Illinois, I've lived in Illinois my entire life. It's wonderful to interview a Hoosier, and thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus.
Well, I thank you. I love your program. And I'll tell you, I think you do a wonderful job. It's an honor to be on your show.
Brand differentiation is especially vital even for us authors and content creators in today's world. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@Apollo Papyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.